It's really short and simple. Dear God, please help me set aside everything I think I know so I may have an open mind and new experiences in my recovery. Please help me to see the truth. Amen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, for those of you who aren't here all the time, just remember the set aside prayer. The reason we say it is whenever we're coming in to study the big book, if we are familiar with it, we can have our own prejudices and presumptions about a lot of things. And if we're struggling in our recovery or in our emotional sobriety, the whole point of coming to a meeting to study something is to learn something new. So I found I didn't really understand this book until I started to pay attention to what I was being taught. And I invite you, as we're going along through this, not to just look at it as somebody reading to you, but constantly ask the question, and this is how you get benefit from it. How do I relate to this? You know, whether we're in Bill's story or whether in Dr. Bob's nightmare or whatever, it's like, how does this affect me? Because at the end of the day, we're each in here for the selfish reason of wanting to stop drinking, right? I mean, nobody comes in here to meet friends initially. That's a byproduct. But we come in here because we want to know how to deal with this incredible craving that we don't understand. So if I've been in AA for a while and it's not working for me, I've got to ask myself, okay, what's the common denominator of me going out each time? What is the common denominator that's standing in the way of me getting this? And for every single alcoholic I've ever known, it always comes down to the final realization of saying, I am, right? I'm in my own way. So last week, we were on page 76 of Into Action. And up until this point, you know, we've gone through our inventory. We have really been in our heads a lot, figuring out what's going on in our life. And from here, we're now taking action. And so we finished last week with the 7th step prayer. And I'm just going to recap reading that for you. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Now, notice it doesn't say point blank, I want you to remove every defective character, full stop. It's asking to remove the character defects that are standing in the way of a higher purpose, of you being useful to other people and to your higher power. Can you guys see that? This isn't a selfish prayer. And neither is this a selfish program. Ultimately, we stay sober by helping other people stay sober. Right now, when we're in the process of doing the steps, we're learning. We're learning. And we're being taught the tools to pass on to the still struggling alcoholic, which to complete your 12th step, you continuously do. Remember, your first step is someone else's 12th step. And that's the only way that this continues on. Okay, so it says that grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding, your HP's bidding. It's not about get out of jail and help Jill be more successful, help Jill get famous, help Jill have all the material. That's not what we're talking about here. It's like, get rid of the selfishness of self, make my motives pure, and help me to get out of my own way so I can help other people. And in the process of doing this, it's not just about passing on to help other people to stop drinking. The byproducts of what comes from practicing this program in all your affairs is going to bring you gifts far beyond your wildest imagination. I'll give you an example. I am blessed this week to have my stepdaughter who I haven't known for 20 years here, and have had a magical bus ride back from being your GSR in Vancouver with her back to Whistler, and had a heart-to-heart talk on the bus where we both were bawling our eyes out. That's a beautiful thing. So owning our side of the streets and relationships and letting people know who we are today is all ahead of you. It's the gifts of the program for people to see us as we are today when we've gotten out of our own way and our motives are for helping other people. So that's the prayer you took last week, or what we're doing in step 7. So now let's start off. We're go on. Now we need more action. And Nick, would you like to kick us off reading that paragraph?
Thank you. I'm Nick and I'm an alcoholic. Now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We make it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we could go to any lengths for victory over alcohol.
Thanks for that, Nick. Now, what is step 8 and 9, you guys? Where do we find it? Where do we go in our book where they list all the steps? So, okay, if you for expediency, it's page 59. So you always, I have a sticker in my big book that says 12 steps, and it's stuck on page 59 because I didn't know all these steps, and I certainly couldn't keep them all straight, and I certainly didn't have them memorized. So when we go to back to page 59, they're all listed there. So you see 7 said, humbly asked him, our HP, to remove our shortcomings. That's the prayer we just read, just so this is all making sense for you, how these steps work together. Okay, so steps 1 to 5 are the owning up steps. Now that we're in step 6, 7, 8, 9, we're in the cleaning up steps. Okay, we're into action. So step 8 says, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So it's a willingness step. Just like step 2 was, we're going to be willing to consider that there's a concept, there's a power greater than ourselves. This is a willingness step. And then it's immediately followed by making direct amends to, this is step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except to do so would injure them or others. Okay, so going back to what Nick has just read on 76, willing, circle the word willing to make amends. That's what step 8 is. It's the willingness. You've made your list in step 4 of people that, you know, you've got to own your side of the street for. This isn't, by the way, about settling arguments, and it's not about telling someone else what they did wrong. All we're doing here, and I don't want you to be afraid of this process, because I made an amends 2 days ago to a foster kid here. It was just the right time, and I realized there was some behavior of mine I had to see if she was okay with. So when we make an amends, it's not the same thing as an apology. Okay, we go to somebody and we say, you know, stuff happened when I was drinking or using, and I'm here because I'm in a program where I'm learning to own my own behavior, and I would like to come to you with my side of the street, not their side of the street. You're not taking their inventory. And then you don't just say, I'm sorry. You say, how or what can I do to make this okay with you? That's a huge difference between just saying, I'm sorry. I've had amends made to me that have been not heartfelt and been just apologies. And talked to the person about it and said, okay, well, that actually isn't okay. And there is something you have to do to make it right. So let me see if I can give you an example. Somebody came to me and apologized for not doing something that they had promised to do with me in the program, and just expected to walk away from that. But it was a huge commitment, and there was no reason for them to have not done it except it was inconvenient. And I turned back to them and said, well, nobody else has been able to fill that spot. Do you think you could just sort it out for the next little bit until I can find somebody? And they weren't willing to do that. It was still inconvenient. So that's not a real amends. If I come to you and I'm not willing to do what you need me to do to make it okay, it's the same thing with a financial amends. Say you owe me $1,000 and you come to me and say, Jill, I stole $1,000 from you. And I'm not going to turn around necessarily and say to you, oh, that's okay. You need to say in your amends to me, or in the amends we're making, how can I make it right? And if repayment of the $1,000 is necessary, that's what you have to be prepared to do. So the step 8 is the willingness to do whatever is necessary to clean up your side of the street. And most of the times in my experience, and a couple of them, they were like, you're making an amends for what? Because it was all in my own head. I'd been carrying around this baggage for 20 years, thinking I was being blamed for something I didn't even have a role in. And the guilt and the pain I carried along with that. And it's like, actually, I never saw you that way at all. There's no amends necessary. So do you see how this works? So much of what goes on in an alcoholic's head is us projecting and speculating what other people are thinking, when most of the time they aren't thinking about us at all. That's not to take away from the real harm we've caused and the real cleaning up that we may have to do. But what I'm trying to get you to understand is it's not as ominous as you might think. Most of the time, people are shocked when we come forward to own our side of the street, period, because they don't think we have it in us. And that's when they really get to know me as a sober person, because today I'm accountable. Okay, so hopefully so now we're in 8 and 9, and it says we made it when we took the inventory. So we did that in step 4. Drastic self-appraisal. I don't like the word drastic. It's not drastic, it's just a self-appraisal. Okay, now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. Okay, so much of the conflict that we have with other people is because we expect everybody to bend to us. We're selfish. Alcoholics are selfish, especially in the later stage of our behavior. We're so caught up in our supply chain issues about having enough, getting enough, keeping enough. I mean, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Where is it stashed? How am I going to get more? What's my backup plan? Where have I got it for tomorrow? We are so self-absorbed that most of the time we're not thinking about other people. But the flip side is most of the time, unless we've done something egregious, people aren't really thinking about us either. So we can be looping in our own heads for no reason. This is where we clean it up. Can you guys see this? All this stuff that's been going around and around and around in your head, clean it up. As my sponsor likes to say, you're as sick as your secrets. So this is where we get rid of this crap. Okay? And then it says, remember it was agreed at the beginning, and here at the bottom of that paragraph are the italics. And you all know when it's in italics, we're to pay special attention. And it says, we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Absolutely. Like, this is the complete willingness. This is the I'm all in the program. This is where we stop intellectualizing the program. We stop intellectualizing our disease. This is into action. This is where I just had to do what I was told. And once I got in the habit of just doing what my sponsor told me to do, my life became a whole lot easier. I'm not saying it was always easy, and I'm not saying I always agreed with it. But once I stopped trying to get out of it and waste energy doing less than she asked me to do or finding an easier, softer way of doing it, I spent more time fighting her initially and fighting the program than it would have taken to have just done it in the first place. Because I'm like most alcoholics, I don't like to be told what to do. Okay, Karen, would you like to read Probably There Are Still Some Misgivings from the bottom of 76?
There we go. Okay, probably there are still some misgivings, and we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt. We may feel
Diffident?
diffident
Yeah.
about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured. To some people, we need not, and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. Do you want the part on the next page?
I'm just going to stop. I'm going to stop right there. Okay,
Yeah.
So let's go. We may feel diffident. Okay, that means defiant.
Oh, yeah.
Or hesitant through lack of self-confidence. Okay, so we don't, it says, let us be, you don't have to go in saying, I found God. I found my higher power. And in fact, be prepared if you're going to take that particular stance for a lot of people to think that you're on something else. Because when I've tried to explain this, I found my, my higher power. If people aren't used to the language, or people are agnostic or atheist, and you start trying to explain why you're coming to them with an amends, and it's because you found God, it's going to be like, okay, Jill, what are you on now? So we don't have to get into the details of our program when we're doing this. And it says, right there, it gives us instructions, should not emphasize the spiritual features on our first approach. And then carry on the top of page 77. I'm going to try to give as many people a chance to read as possible. Jaron, do you want to take it from the top of 77?
Alcoholic, we might prejudice them. At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order. But this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. It is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we have gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with a chin. Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message, but our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. He is going to be more interested in a demonstration of good will than in our talk of spiritual discoveries.
Okay, so this is basically just saying in more complicated words what I just said. Okay, so just like we say in our prayer that we just did, where we said that we're trying to be usefulness to our higher power and to our fellows, was the 7-step prayer we just took. Now look at the language here. It says our real purpose, and I invite you to highlight this. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. It's just saying the same thing again, but it's also saying that we don't want to come across to people when we're going through this process as some sort of religious zealot, because they're not going to hear our amends. They're just, so when you start talking to people from your past, in my experience, first of all the amends don't have to be done at the same time. I had layers of amends of people that I knew I could approach right away, and those that I also knew had to be under the right circumstances. The point is, in step 8, you are willing, regardless of circumstances, to make amends to everybody that you have harmed. Willing to. Okay, doesn't mean we're going to actually have to do a face-to-face amends with each of those people. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's nothing to fear here, but the list should be as exhaustive as possible for you, right? This is to uncover all the stuff that is weighing us down. Okay, it's not to turn into saints. This is so we can walk lighter, right? Okay, so, and then notice it says at the bottom there, but our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. That's a definition of the amend. Right there, definition of an amend. Sincere desire to set right the wrong. And then notice in the next sentence it says demonstration. Okay, circle that word, demonstration. And then very quickly flip over to page 78 and notice that the word demonstration again is going to appear at the end of the first paragraph. We have made our demonstration, done our part. It's over, water over the dam. So flipping back, here's how I want you to understand this. Step 8, I'm willing. Step 9, I'm doing it. That's my demonstration. Now, if my amend is not accepted, and I've had that happen, I've had it thrown back in my face, it's still water over the dam. It's over with. I have demonstrated goodwill, and I have done it with the right motivation, with the willingness to clean up my side of the street. So our motivation is to own our side, and also write this in the margin to the side. It's not just it's to right the wrong of the past. It's not just to apologize. It's to right the wrong. So the easiest way I found to do that is to say to the person, what can I do to make this okay with you? And I can honestly say that 95% of the time the answer is, you just did. We find it difficult to speak to people and feel emotional. And we have pushed people, in my experience, away for so long that they've stopped trying to reach us on an emotional basis. So in my experience, before I got to this stage, I was in a lot of superficial conversations and people were dancing around me. This is also why we don't get into these steps until we've got some solid sobriety under our belt, because it is emotional. And this alcoholic drinks on emotions. Mm-hmm. So I need to make sure I am doing this with a sponsor that understands me. And I don't go off and just do my amends willy-nilly. Well, I do a couple now because I'm years into this. But when I first started doing amends, I talked to my sponsor about it. She knew the story, because that's all your sponsor is. You need one person that's a confidant that gets you, that knows your story. Doesn't mean you have to get every detail of your life known to them, but knows your general story. So when I say I need to make an amends to Bev or to Bill or whatever, they know who that person is. And you describe the circumstances and they guide you through how to make the amends. The time, the place, setting you up to succeed. We don't just do this ourselves and go, okay, right, I'm now going to go and phone up 20 people that I've really done some whoppers to over the days and I'm just going to say, I'm sorry, how can I make it right and do it? I'm going to clean it up in 2 hours. It doesn't work like that. You talk to your sponsor about it. You discuss what order to do them in. And, usually I recommend with sponsees, start with the easy ones. Start with the people that that love you, know your story, know you're an alcoholic, know where you're at, and start there. Okay. So the demonstration is the key part there. Lori, do you want to pick up in the middle of 77 with "we don't use this"?
Sure, Lori Alcoholic. We don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. When it will serve any good purpose, we are willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. It may be he has done us more harm than we have done him. And though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we are still not keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with the person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret.
Okay, so that's a big ask. It sounds, doesn't it? But notice in this tact and common sense, I want you to circle that. And that's also about talking to your sponsor about the timing of amends. If it's not to be done selfishly. If I've got somebody who has just got divorced and there was an extramarital affair involved in there and I had some role to do with it, I don't just go up to that person and say, oh, well, I want to own my part in our affair, and they're just reeling from a divorce, or the other party doesn't know you were involved or whatever. That's not what we do here. If there is the exception of doing the amends is when you're going to cause harm to the other person. So it's selfish in the respect that we clean up our side of the street, but we never do it at the cost of somebody else's welfare. Okay? That's when we can do other things like living amends. Now you ask, what's a living amends? A living amends is changing our conduct so that we never behave the way that we did with that person, or going and making, say you have a financial amends to make to somebody and you can't reach them, you can make a donation of the equivalent amount to a charity. If it's on your conscience and that's how you have to do to make it straight, right? Or you can donate some time, right? If you feel you ripped off your employer, there's no reason why you can't contribute to a rehab fund for the company or something like that. There's all sorts of different ways that we can clean up our side of the street. The point is, we want our feelings, it's over with, it's gone. I don't have to cope with that anymore. I've done my side of the street. Now, in that last sentence, it's harder to go to an enemy than a friend, that's for sure. That's why we start off with our amends, the easy ones, going to friends, going to people we're still communicating with. And it says, but we find it much more beneficial to us because usually our enemies are the ones we have scores that aren't settled with. And part of us may still be holding on to resentment and blame. And this, by the process of not being able to point that out to them, as difficult as it is, because let's face it, some of the people that we have relationships with are still active in their addictions, still drinking, or they're never going to get us and they're not willing to try and understand us. That doesn't mean we shirk from doing that, because right now they're living rent-free in your head. They're living rent-free in my head. It's unfinished business. By going and having the conversation, as awkward as it is, and it's so tempting to want to take their inventory and say, well, I did this, but if you remember, you did this, 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 and this, and that's why I did it. That's not the way we do an amends. It's only your side of the street. So if you haven't got a sponsor, make sure that you get one And certainly make sure when you're going through these actual steps that you're in close communication with your sponsor, especially this one. Okay, because I've seen people go out and just decide, oh, I'm ready to do an amends. And then it's gone thrown back in their face, or it didn't go out the way I mean, and when I've heard about the amends they did, I'm like, well, of course it ended up that way. You didn't set yourself up to succeed. You didn't consider where the other person was at all. You did it selfishly, right? And you weren't willing, like, these are things I can see in my own behavior, but also with sponsees that have gone off on their own and thought, okay, I need to go do an amends right now, without truly understanding how we build up to it. Okay, we start with the easy ones and we work our way through it. And also, it's not all necessarily happening at the same time. What we do, because I didn't even know some of the amends I had to make, because some of the stuff I had blackouts. Or it's become clear to me in my sobriety as it's progressed that I owe an amends that might not have even occurred to me. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So Gary, can you pick up on under no condition on 77?
Yeah, Gary, alcoholic. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply we tell him that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result.
So in the side there, you guys, on that paragraph, write guidelines to making amends. So these are our instructions for how we do it. And the other thing is we stick to our own experience. Okay, we don't start bringing in other people's experience with that person and say, well, you did this to so and so too. And I'm cautioning you that this is, keep it in your side of the street, are paramount rules here. This is not about going to confront someone in your past and make them feel bad, right? At their expense, we get a clear conscience. That's not what this is about. You are going there, cap in hand, saying, you know, I had a role in this. It's not about their role. How can I make it better? And then be prepared to do what is necessary. Okay? Let's see. We now have in 9 cases out of 10 to read. Who hasn't read yet? Somebody jump in.
I'm Suzanne, grateful member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I will jump in on page 78. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we are calling upon admits his own fault. The man we are calling upon admits his own fault, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally, they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We have made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam.
Okay, so first of all, I want you to circle in 9 cases out of 10. Those are pretty good odds, guys. And that's my experience. 90% of the time, something beautiful is going to happen out of your amends. The most beautiful thing is you're not going to be carrying that, from a very selfish point of view, is you're not going to be carrying that baggage around with you anymore. Right?
Yep.
And in my experience, the melting away in an hour of years of pain, especially to be told, like the one that's just floored me is like, well, I never thought of you that way anyway. Like sometimes our own perception, our own self-loathing, our own guilt dramatizes and increases in our own heads just how bad we were. Yeah, and part of it too is that I didn't think people knew I was an alcoholic, even though I was slurring my speech and falling down and crying or yelling or being abusive on the phone. Everybody knows, right? It's just some of us have been more functioning than others. So it's a really good example in just human relations to have somebody that has wronged you. Imagine how you'd feel if somebody who'd wronged you comes up and says, you know, that $1,000 I ripped you off, I owe it to you, and it may take me a while to pay it back, but $50 a month, I'm willing to do it. Or that big argument that we had, and or all the different things that you can think of where you feel, oh God, they hate me for that. Having the actual conversation, 9 times out of 10, they're probably not even still thinking of you. They're probably surprised to hear from you. And 9 times out of 10, they're delighted you're getting well. And it's inspirational to other people. It's like when something is stolen from a store clerk, and there's that odd person that comes back in and says, I stole this and I'm returning it. Like that is going to make more impact on somebody. Or if it's some transgression or shady deal we've done in the past, and we go back to that person and say, I don't know if you were even aware of this, but I ripped you off. And what do I need to do to make this right between us? Because it's weighing on my conscience. 9 times out of the 10, it's like, hey, you know what? We were kids. Or that was 20 years ago. But thank you so much for renewing my faith in human relations by coming to me and saying to my face that you're owning your side of the street. That is my experience with the amends. So, and it's saying right here, 9 cases out of 10, this book was approved and written by, 100 people read this and agreed on this wording. That's their experience. Also, it says, again, we've got the, sometimes the man we are calling upon. We know to read in here, sometimes the woman. Gender doesn't matter in here. And then the big kicker is those final 2 sentences. I want you to highlight and circle that. We have made our demonstration. There's the word. Remember this chapter is into action. Okay? The demonstration, the actual amends is your demonstration. You've actively done something. Done our part. It doesn't say done their part, done our part. We've gone with willingness and purity of soul to try clean up our side of the street. And then it says, I love these words, it's water over the dam. We let it go. And really, your amends, you'll find that all these resentments, imagine them all as a single lead piece of suit of armor that you've been walking around with for however long that particular thing's been. It is liberating to actually go poof and let that go. Because the things that we think about in our subconscious or have nightmares about, these are things that we need to address. We're as sick as our secrets. And if you're an alcoholic like me, I am so screwed up in some of my thinking that I thought some of this stuff, as it turned out, was a much bigger deal than it really was. But regardless, for you, it might be a big deal. It might be a crime you've committed. There's some very serious things that I've heard. But it's your side of the street to clean up, and then you move on. Okay, Winston, are you there? Would you like to read Most Alcoholics Owe Money? It's the middle of 78.
Sure. Winston, alcoholic addict. Most of us, most alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors, telling them what we are trying to do. We make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face it.
Okay, so fear of financial insecurity is one of the big ones that we deal with in step 4. And financial amends, it's surprising if you have a fear of financial insecurity, how much talking to other people about it and negotiating some sort of a payment plan or just explaining our circumstances and a willingness to make it right resolves the matters. I've had sponsees who've had some pretty big financial burdens and have been forgiven a lot of their debt just because they've gone and owned up where they're at, what they're doing, and they've shown that they have a program of recovery. And even the willingness to say, if it's $25 a week or $50 a week, I'm going to pay you until my side of the street is cleared. And sometimes people will forgive your debts. But you don't, if you're in early recovery or you're not at this stage and you've got financial concerns, you're in recovery now. You are working at sorting your life out now. So if you're feeling strong enough, and again, this is a sponsor consideration, talking about finances with creditors, or getting someone to help you organize your credit now can take an awful lot of pressure off of you, whether it's a landlord or it's a credit card company. There are all sorts of different ways of getting financial assistance to take not that you're going to be relieved of the burden of what you actually owe, although sometimes it's discounted hugely through credit organizations. The point is, we get rid of the fear. Fear causes us to drink. So by addressing our financial, like it says, most alcoholics owe money. If you've been drinking to the point where it is your primary occupation and alcohol has been your higher power, then your finances probably don't look as good as they used to. The great news is that when you talk to people honestly about it and you tell them that I've got a sponsor, I'm in a program, I'm making a plan. Now, a caution here, you don't have to go and lay your heart on your sleeve for every single individual that you know. And if you know people in your personal life that don't know you were drinking and you've got business relationships with them, you don't have to wear your heart on a sleeve and say, I'm an alcoholic, and I found God and all the rest. We use our sponsors' experience and guidance to go through the financial amends as well. We need to talk to somebody who's clear-minded about these things with a plan and bounce the ideas by them, how we're going to approach this. We aren't doing this alone. And even talking to a sponsor about it and making the plan can help. Okay? So that's how we deal with the money part of it. Okay, this is probably a really good point for us to finish tonight, because now we go into committing criminal offenses and cleaning those up. So I'm going to stop the recording there. And just we can mark that that's where we're leaving off tonight. So that's essentially, just to recap, into action on steps 8 and 9. That's what we're in the middle of. And we're finishing at 78. Okay, most alcoholics owe money. I'm going to stop the recording.